The views and opinions expressed on America's Workforce Union podcast and its digital media channels are solely those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of the producers or sponsors.
Welcome to the America's Workforce Radio Podcast, the flagship production of the American Workers Radio and Podcast Network, where organized labor and its never-ending fight to protect the rights of the American worker come first. Now, presented by LIUNA, Laborers International Union of North America. Here's your host, Ed Flash Ferenc.
New Jersey clamping down on the misclassification of independent contractors. The latest case involves a $1.5 million fine. The latest Union Busters report is out from our friends at the Labor Lab. We'll run down the list. And today on the show, the Vice President of the 4th District of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. Welcome to the Tuesday, April 14th edition of America's Workforce, where we're available on at least 5 platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. Featured guest today, Austin Keyser. Austin is the Vice President of the 4th District of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. IBEW.org is the website. He's had that position for about a year now. He was assistant to the International President for Government Affairs from July of 2021 until August of 2024. That's when he returned to the 4th District. That district, by the way, includes West Virginia, Kentucky, Virginia, Maryland, District of Columbia, and his native state of Ohio. Austin is a third-generation member of the IBEW, actually began his apprenticeship at Portsmouth, Ohio, Local 575, back in 2001. Little shout-out there for Local 575. We'll talk a bit about his journey, and today we're primarily going to talk about, well, 2 things. We're going to talk about the importance of electing the right people to Congress. And one of those people is Sherrod Brown, who we've featured on the show many, many times. And for all the right reasons, too, because Sherrod stands for workers. And what we're going to talk about today is what happened 5 years ago, the Butch Lewis Act. Now, Butch was a Teamster, and you may recall this was well over a decade ago when a lot of the multi-employer plans were in big trouble. And a lot of this goes back to the financial crisis of 2007, 2008, 2009. And a lot of those funds, well, they saw a big haircut. And they were going to become insolvent until the Biden administration came along and said, you know what? We got to save those pensions. And a lot of those, we're talking millions and millions of people in various unions, including the IBEW. And Austin is going to talk all about that. And also going to talk about what's going on in the IBEW. So Austin Keyser, Vice President of the 4th District of the IBEW, will be our featured guest on today, Trades Day, right here on America's Workforce. Now, a brief look into the world of labor. This segment brought to you by Boyd Watterson Asset Management. You can find more at boydwatterson.com. Got to salute the folks in New Jersey, especially those in the AFL-CIO and all the unions that make up the AFL-CIO, which today are applauding the New Jersey Department of Labor enforcement of independent contractor misclassification. Here's the story. The New Jersey DOL recently audited the state's largest operator of microtransit programs in the state, River North Transit, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Via Transportation. The Labor Department in New Jersey found that they violated the rules regarding the misclassification of workers as independent contractors and failed to pay into worker protection funds like unemployment insurance and temporary disability payments. Now, this investigation began about a year ago and has resulted in a fine of $1,579,881. And that covers the time between 2021 and 2024. Now, this company has the right to appeal the ruling. and they have not made any admission of guilt. So for this reason, they can continue to exploit their workers by classifying them as independent contractors rather than employees, which, of course, strips away a host of worker protections, which includes overtime, workers' comp, employer-sponsored health insurance and pension enrollment, temporary disability, paid family leave, earned sick days, even the minimum wage. Furthermore, companies that cheat their workers rob the state of over $500 million in payroll taxes a year and place companies that play by the rules at a competitive disadvantage. We've talked about this on the show so many times. In fact, we talked about it last week with Tim Driscoll, who heads the Bricklayers Union. Well, here's the deal. There is legislation pending that would reform the microtransit industry and require all companies bidding on these contracts to define their workers as employees. The current administration has several high-profile misclassifications against similar app-based transportation companies like Uber, Lyft, and Amazon. So once again, congratulations to the unions in the state of New Jersey, along with the New Jersey State AFL-CIO, saluting the Department of Labor, coming down on the misclassification of so darn many independent contractors. Let's talk a little bit about union busters, and I got to salute Bob Funk and his team over at the Labor Lab in Montana. Does a great job tracking down the companies that hire and spend a lot of money on union busters. As soon as they find out that there might be a union in their workplace, we gotta hire somebody. Get that union out of here. And they pay big bucks. Like Distinct Artistry out of Connecticut, they hired the Crossroads Group Labor Relations Consultants, $475 an hour. That election is still open. Elections also open at Exalta Coding Systems in Michigan. They hired the Cummings Group for $3,750 a day. Grayson Collin Electric Cooperative out of Texas hired Action Resources just shy of $4,000 a day. And they beat the workers. That election was lost. In addition, and these are the LM20s. The LM20s have to be filed. If you're going to hire somebody to make sure the union doesn't happen, you're supposed to do that right away. A lot of companies take their time. Labor Relations amended their LM20 at Pet IQ Community Veterinary Clinics to add their compensation rate of $400 an hour. That election didn't work out for the workers. And we've got some good news here. Water Co. of the Central States, that's in Illinois, they hired Road Warrior Productions, $3,800 a day, but it didn't work. Workers won the election. And AMI Mechanical, Nevada, also hired Road Warrior, $3,800 a day. That election also won. Doesn't always work. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to focus on the IBEW District 4. Vice President Austin Keyser will be joining us on the 5th anniversary of the Butch Lewis Act. What that means for workers today. That story right after this on America's Workforce.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferenc.
This segment of the show is brought to you by the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. For more information, please visit bmwe.org.
It takes LIUNA to keep America running. Over 70,000 public employees are part of LIUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, delivering critical services such as healthcare and emergency response, as well as maintaining roads and sanitation systems. Even the National Postal Mail Handlers Union, representing over 47,000 U.S. postal workers, is affiliated with LIUNA. Find out what it takes for LIUNA to keep America running at liuna.org. That's LIUNA.org.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Heat and Frost Insulators Labor Management Cooperative Trust. Find out more at insulators.org/LMCT.
America's Workforce appreciates our sponsor, the Columbus Central Ohio Building and Construction Trades Council, who represents more than 18,000 workers from 19 affiliated local unions and district councils.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers. You can find more at ifpte.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Communication Workers of America. You can find more at cwa-union.org.
American workers are sick of struggling to get by. It's time to get ahead. In the Teamsters Union, workers are winning industry-leading contracts, historically high wages, fully paid health care, and retirement benefits you can count on. Across the country, Teamsters fight alongside our brothers and sisters to secure a better life. It's what we've been doing and how we've been living for more than a century. When we fight, we win. Join us. Be a Teamster.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Ferenc.
And remember, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast, AWF Union Podcast. Hard to believe it's been 5 years since Congress passed the Butch Lewis Act. This was a fight. I mean, it went back, I guess, around 2014 or so, and a lot of the multi-employer pension plans took a big hit. It's funny, too, and I said this on the show so many times, Congress finds a way to bail out corporations, institutions, but when it comes to workers, boy, I tell you, they take the back seat on that. Joining us, our featured guest today is Austin Keyser. Austin is a 4th District International Vice President for the IBEW. That's the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. National website for the IBEW, real simple, ibew.org. And he was a key player in making sure that the Butch Lewis Act made it to the finish line. So, Austin, welcome to America's Workforce. Thanks for joining us today. I know you did a lot, especially in the Midwest. We'll talk about that. Talk to me a little bit about getting involved, why you chose the IBEW. I always like to find people's journey in life, and everybody's got a different path. We know that. Sometimes it's an easy path. Sometimes there's a lot of hurdles. Talk to me about your path. Go ahead, brother.
First of all, thanks for having me on the show. Great show. I know a long history of talking about workers' issues, and I really appreciate what you do. So thanks for having me on. Yeah, so I started out like everybody else does in the leadership of the IBEW with a tool belt on at the very entry level of our trade. But prior to that, I grew up in Southern Ohio, outside, I say Portsmouth, Ohio, because that's a big city, but really it's a town of about 27,000 people. And that was quite a trek just to get into it. So I grew up out in the middle of a forest for the most part, coal country. So when I was growing up young, it was all coal jobs, right? Coal barges, coal trains, coal-fired power plants, coal blast furnaces and coking facilities, and a lot of great union jobs, but not the cleanest jobs in the world. So as evolution happens, they shut down and bankruptcies happened and workers got left stranded. I grew up in a very impoverished area and one of the poorest counties in Ohio. We had all kinds of aspirations in life. I wasn't going to, my dad was an electrician, my grandfather, I'm a 3rd generation. I didn't necessarily grow up on that side of the family. I was raised by a mom that made minimum wage. Most of the time I was growing up, worked her ass off to feed us, right?
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
I grew up, wanting to get out of that. And I had some other options and they didn't work out for me. And I ended up in the apprenticeship by happenstance, really. It was a bad market. They weren't taking a lot of apprentices in like they are now in Ohio. 8 kids in my apprenticeship class. I get in and I found my path in life. I just loved the union. We had some big jobs that took off about halfway through my apprenticeship, able to serve in some committee roles. And we were working about 1,800 travelers at the time. So all the local guys were foremans or general foremans or, running the show, which was, the union needed. But they needed guys like me to step up and play roles of steward, even as an apprentice. And that was a pretty big job. So I really got I cut my teeth, walking the powerhouse with a bunch of good union guys actually running the plant. So they helped me more than they tried to hurt me. You don't find out a lot of times the relationship between management and labor. They were good union guys, playing a temporary management role. I think they were rooting for me more than most of the guys walking around out there with the tool belts on. So great group of guys, great local, just found passion for it. Became a business manager when I was 27 years old. pretty young, get a bunch of old grizzled construction workers to vote for a kid. But they did. I did that for a few years, and then I got a call from Rich Trumpka one day, asked me to come to the AFL-CIO. So I left the IBEW. I never dropped my ticket, of course, but I left being business manager, and I wanted to be in the fight. 2010, Tea Party swept us. There were fights everywhere. Wisconsin was popping off, Senate Bill 5 in Ohio, and right to work in Indiana, right to work in Michigan, and I wanted to go where the fight was. So I did. I was the state director for the National AFL-CIO in Ohio during the Senate Bill 5 fight and after, and then the Midwest region director, which covers about 100,000 local unions and somewhere around 6 million members. Got to be very close with Rich, traveled the Midwest, going from state house to state house, from the Wisconsin Capitol building to the Ohio Capitol building, to helping smuggle people out of legislators out of Indiana to stop right to work vote. So it's been a fun career, but got to know two guys real well when I was there. A guy named Lonnie Stevenson, who was vice president in the 6th District, became president of the International shortly after that. But especially, I'd known Kenny Cooper for a long time. He serves as our international president right now. He's really just taking this union to a whole other dimension. I've been happy to sort of be with him and in that fight for a very long time. So here I sit today after serving 8 years, heading up all of our government affairs here in D.C. I've now served international vice president of the 4th District. But 8 years out here in the heart of what I know we want to talk about today, the Butch Lewis Act. We were here through most of that, through the first Trump administration and the deep fights, and I just really watched shared. There's two types of politicians, right, that call us, are friendly to us. They're friendly to us, and they're kind of kick open the doors of those chambers, waving the union flag every day, and not taking any shit from anybody, either party, and just standing up for what's right and for the dignity of work.
Exactly. That's what it's all about. It's funny you talk about the IBEW, how you got involved. And, we say this on the show many, many times. It's the pathway to the middle class. And think about that area of Ohio that you came from. A lot of poverty, and you found your way out of that, and look where you are today. So it's so important that we showcase that here on America's Workforce. We covered that whole journey on the Butch Lewis Act. Why don't you take me back to, I mentioned, I want to say it was around 2014. Congress had an opportunity to help out those that had pensions that were suffering, and primarily the multi-employer pensions we're talking about here. But they didn't do anything. And there was a lot of unions, IBEW for one, that was going to take a haircut. I mean, a big haircut on this. Why don't you explain what happened and what you needed to do?
Yeah. So first of all, pensions are the hallmark, the gold standard of what it means to be a union member, right? Dignity in retirement after a career of dignity and work is what we're all fighting for. Nobody wants to work till they're dead. We had a real problem. Deregulation, changing industries, mostly caused by public policy, really tore at the fabric of collective bargaining. They left a lot of stranded folks, particularly in trucking, for the Teamsters, which Butch Lewis was a Teamster. And I want to make sure I give that shout out. Their pensions got decimated because they went from having these big over-the-road carriers to having a bunch of independent truck drivers, where the industry really shifted the burden of being their own employer to the individual truck driver. And in that case, it left a bunch of orphaned pension plans, right? A bunch of people who paid into pensions who their employer no longer existed anymore. And so pension payments weren't going into it. They were decimated. So there's a backstop to that. We have an insurance, kind of like what you'd have if you have a deposit in a bank account in the government, right? There's a federally structured insurance company that we call the PBGC, the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation. Now, this is important context, right? So if those Teamster plans would have gone underwater, they would have had to go to that insurance. But the only place that insurance is funded from is from contributions from other pension funds. So essentially all you're doing is shifting the burden of stranded assets caused by bad public policy to existing union members who still have a pension, and then making their pension bad at the same time. So it would have, the effect in the end would have been to collapse completely the defined benefit pension system of the United States. Sherb was a champion. Like I said, back to 2014, we knew this was a serious, serious problem. Really, 2008, we knew it was a serious, serious problem, right? 2014, everybody else kind of emerged out of the 2008 crisis, except for the pension funds, right? Then we knew at that time, very difficult to try to recover. And there was a lot of iterations of what we could do to accomplish this. But the door was slammed in our face by people who either, one, didn't understand what we're talking about, because this is a very complex subject matter, didn't understand what we're talking about, or maybe liked the idea of all those defined benefit, that guaranteed pension money going off into a sector where a lot of money managers and others could pick at that money and put it into 401ks. And it'd be a big booming industry for a lot of people sucking money out of the pensioners' pockets. So you saw a lot of defense of that, but you just saw a lack of willingness in government to handle it, except for Sherrod Brown, who was just, all over it from day one, just all over it, saying, hey, we're not going to do this. Bad public policy caused deregulation and a lot of the crisis that we're facing. And this is a downstream effect. Intentional, unintentional, it doesn't really matter. It's happening. We need to address it. And here is a prescription for helping to fix that problem. Well, he didn't back off. A lot of people would have tried that for 2 or 3 years or 2 or 3 Congresses and not made it and ended up with some really watered down compromise or some other iteration or no fix at all. Moved on to something they thought they could be productive on, but he did not give up. Not one time. Started every Congress off. This is his special project. He wasn't going to let go of it. And he became known really during that time. He'd always been known as a labor guy. He really became labor senator.
Yeah, absolutely. Sadly, Butch Lewis wasn't alive to see what happened as a result of the work of Sherrod Brown and others that supported him. Why did it take so long? I know policy takes a while, and I guess there's a lot of conservatives that, like I said before, they just don't care about helping workers. They'd say, well, you know what, you should have held on to that money in some shape or form. You shouldn't have had it here. All the arguments that they say, it's your fault. It's your fault. If you can't support yourself in an older age, that's your fault. But talk to me about the process. You were part of that whole process to make sure that it, got to the finish line. What did you hear, and what made it finally get to the finish line?
It got real heated at the end, right? As things usually do, right before they either break loose or you get beat, right? Yeah. So it was midterms, just before the midterms, Trump's first term. Republicans knew they were coming in. They were going to take the Senate. It was pretty obvious the way the states lined up. They were going to have control. So they started proposing a compromise while the Democrats still had the majority. That compromise was something, they called the Grassley-Alexander bill. And that was two other Republican senators. And that bill, really what it did was said, okay, you acknowledge that we're going to do away with defined benefit pension plans in this country. And in that case, we'll try to help save you a little bit, right? It was a terrible deal. A lot of people wanted to take it. And I won't lie to you, there were some labor union leaders who wanted to take that deal because it was such a scary moment, right? We're playing chicken with fate. We knew that they were going to have the Senate. They were going to do whatever they wanted to us and that Trump would pass it. But we were able to hold on and we were able to keep it from happening during those 2 years, really because of Sherrod. And by lobbying and rallying us up, right, making sure we had something to lobby around and we had a champion, we were all able to collaborate. And it was really, it was us, the Western Conference of Teamsters, the United Food and Commercial Workers were strong in this fight. Kenny Cooper, our international president, chaired the Multi-Employer Pension Committee for the AFL-CIO. People who weren't in the AFL-CIO participated in it. But we had a really concerted effort, but it was a fight because it looked like if we would have lost, we'd have lost it all. And so there were people who were willing to take a compromise at that time and really steady-handed leadership. Liz Schuler was very instrumental in this role, but Sherrod just said, hey, we can win this. And then we went into Georgia. We got Biden elected, then we went into Georgia. And we were able to win the special elections runoff there too. Flipped the Senate just enough. Biden came in, Sherrod was right in his face. We got to get this done. This is important, right? I'll give it to him. The House, there wasn't much appetite in the House to get it done. The very first bill, if you'll remember, that Biden signed into law was the COVID, one of the recovery bills, right? The second or third iteration of it. I'm forgetting now, but Sherrod went to him and said, this ought to be in there. We bailed out just what you said leading into the show. We bailed out the banks. We bailed out the auto industry. We bailed out the airlines. By no fault of their own, union workers are suffering and they're getting hurt in this economy. And if we don't have money to bail them out, then what are we even doing here? Those are those are the citizens of our country. Those are the elderly, the vulnerable of our country that have been taking a haircut for years and are at the highest risk. He made that pitch and Biden told the House, don't send me a bill without that edit. He even Sherrod even plussed it up at that point. We were able to get it across as something that was more like a bailout, more like hey, we're not going to let this happen. Bad policy created it. We're going to fix it, and we're going to write a check to do that out of the Treasury. We're not going to go out and say, hey, you're going to have to borrow some money. Hey, you're going to have to take a 20% haircut and a compromise and some kind of middle-of-the-road deal, split the kitty kind of thing. No, I'm not going to do that. We're going to fix this problem, and we're going to help the American worker. That type of devotion, that kind of like being centered on that type of policy is what Sherrod does. And anybody who knows him well knows that that's all he thinks about, right? There's no special interests out here wagging that guy around. He wakes up saying, how do we put workers first? How do we bring people out of poverty? With the recognition that the only successful path that we've ever seen in this country to bring workers out of poverty and give them a fair stake in this country is a collective bargaining process, a collective bargaining agreement, and a pension plan. And so empowering labor unions to empower workers, to empower themselves is what he believes in, and his policies is just dead center on it. And I've never been more impressed by a politician in my life. And I've never met one, I think, that cares more. And I've been doing government affairs and policy at a pretty deep level for a lot of years now.
You're 100% right, my man. This is one moment in history where we put workers first. That is one moment in history. There's no doubt about it. Austin, I got a couple more questions for you, but I got to take a break here. Our featured guest today is Austin Keyser. Austin is the 4th District International Vice President for the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. That district, by the way, includes West Virginia, Kentucky, Virginia, Maryland, the District of Columbia, and his home state, and that's the great state of Ohio. Austin, I'm going to take a quick break. More to come from Austin Keyser right after this. Once again, you're listening to America's Workforce. Don't go away.
This is America's Workforce. More shows available at awfradio.com.
It takes LIUNA to build North America's infrastructure. From roads and bridges to schools and skyscrapers, the men and women of LIUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, build the projects we depend on. From constructing the Freedom Tower on the site of the former World Trade Center to untangling Washington, D.C.'s congested interstate, LIUNA members do the work that matters. Find out what it takes to be built by LIUNA at liuna.org. That's liuna.org.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, where you can find more at teamster.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Ironworkers. You can find more at ironworkers.org.
There is unity and strength for workers.
We are the USW.
We are the USW.
The United Steelworkers.
The largest industrial union in North America.
We represent 850,000 members in the U.S., Canada, and the Caribbean.
We work in metals,
rubber,
chemicals,
paper,
oil refining,
atomic energy, and the service sector.
We are steelworkers, standing strong and fighting for what's right.
America's Workforce is presented by the Laborers International Union of North America. Feel the power right now at liuna.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the United Steelworkers. You can find more at usw.org.
America's Workforce is sponsored in part by Boyd Watterson Asset Management, LLC. Find out more about our investment solutions tailored to meet the needs of Taft-Hartley funds at boydwatterson.com.
The Ironworkers Great Lakes District Council, consisting of 8 ironworker local unions in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Michigan. We build the skylines and bridges along the Great Lakes. With more work than ever before, the Great Lakes District Council is actively searching out the next great ironworker, whether it's building the next Intel plant or constructing a bridge to safely connect our great cities along the lake. So join the Ironworkers Great Lakes District Council today. Find out how and learn more about the council by visiting IBEWDistrictCouncil.com.
Now, back to Ed Flash Ferenc with America's Workforce.
And remember, you can check us out on at least 5 platforms. That includes YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. And when you get an opportunity, here's what you do. Just sign up and receive our shows on a regular basis and give us a rating. Always appreciate those 5-star ratings, so please keep them coming. Let's go back to our featured guest today. Austin Keyser is his name, and he is the 4th District International Vice President for the IBEW. Once again, that district includes West Virginia, Kentucky, Virginia, Maryland, District of Columbia, and the state of Ohio, which she started with the IBEW many, many years ago in Portsmouth, Ohio. Now he's a vice president. I tell you, I love how you climbed up the ranks here, Austin. You made a difference, especially when it comes to helping out Sherrod Brown on the Butch Lewis Act, which is the 5th anniversary now. It's hard to believe that was 5 years ago. It wasn't easy. Took a long time. Persistence definitely paid off. What are we talking about with numbers here? Because I know a lot of pensions were saved. Maybe you can run down some numbers on how many people we were talking about at the time that are getting pensions today because of the Butch Lewis Act.
It's hard to measure exactly, and let me tell you why. It's because it is literally everybody who had a multi-employer defined benefit pension that still has one today because of the Butch Lewis. The PBGC would have collapsed, is what we were looking at, and it would have bankrupted everybody. But you're looking at somewhere around 10,000 in Ohio alone, right? So a tremendous number of workers that were saved. And not only that, but so many who had already taken a cut in their pension plans to keep a little bit of a pension alive. A lot of them had to sort of take concessions and reduce their pension payments. This bill also went back and made them whole, not just brought them up to what they should be getting now, but went all the way back to when they first started losing money and made them whole all the way back. So it was life-changing, one-time cash payouts to a lot of folks who had been who had been living very lean for a lot of years and not really enjoying that good, solid union pension they had worked for and earned.
Austin, if you don't mind, I want to take an opportunity here to point out the fact that we need to keep good people that support unions in office, people like Sherrod Brown, and people that come from a union. I call attention to somebody that you probably know, Don Norcross, who comes from the IBEW in the state of New Jersey. And there's more union brothers and sisters. We're watching one over in the state of Nebraska, Dan Osborne. We had him on the show. He's a steam fitter. He led the strike at Kellogg's back in 2017. We're seeing more and more of that. And for very good reason. I'm sure you've been traveling around the country. Ohio is a good example, too, how Ohio has changed since you were working on SB 5, because we have gone to the point where workers are taking a back seat. We got to put workers back in the front seat. In order to do something like that, we got to get the right people. Can you talk about that? And obviously, the IBEW is involved in that.
We have the right people stepping up to run for core offices in Ohio right now. For sure. So Sherrod Brown and Amy Acton on a ticket together is just tremendously centered on worker values and worker rights and putting labor unions. It won't be asking anymore. It's going to be sitting at the table. And that's what they want to see. They don't believe in like giving to the labor movement. They believe in emboldening the labor movement and creating the opportunity for us to lead for ourselves, right? So it's great. Don Norcross, great example, right? There's somewhere around 300 attorneys in Congress. There's only one electrician. We need a lot more, right? So, look, we laugh about it, but it is serious that nobody except for us wakes up every day saying, how can I make the union stronger, right? Yeah. Some people may wake up and say, I'm a friend with the union. I believe in what the union's doing. I like to get contributions from the union. All right. I like when the union comes out and knocks doors for me. And they're great guys and like anything I can do to help you. And then there's the people like Sherrod Brown who wake up every day saying, hey, I'm with you. Let's go. Let's roll our sleeves up. Let's go. Right? We're fighting for the same thing. We're fighting for the same purpose. This is my belief. This is what I'm centered on. I mean, it goes all over the place, right? An attorney, what do they practice? Do they sell airplanes? Do they write contracts for airplanes? Well, they know the airline industry and the brokering of airplanes. They don't know anything about operating a nuclear power plant or constructing, a major industrial project or power lines, right? They don't know anything about welding on a boiler. They don't know anything about engineering. They don't know the construction industry. They don't know about competitive bidding. And so they don't know unless we educate them, right? So we spend a tremendous amount of time educating. But then there's people like Sherrod that have been around forever, right? He does the educating now. I see a lot of young union leaders who get a better education from Sherrod Brown than they would from union leadership in our unions. Just a absolute bull for us. He has Amy Acton there running for governor at the top of the ticket. Ohio to me right now feels a lot like it did back in 2006 when Ohio workers swept the state house at a party. Now, I know redistricting happened since then. We're probably not going to have a big sweep, but the energy feels right. I don't always trust the polls. I've been doing this long enough not to trust the polls, but the polling looks great. The energy feels great. Workers are energized. They're fired up. They're tired of the nonsense that was going on, sort of the tough man act being put on for us on display every day when you turn on the news, getting us into wars and being just bombastic in general. People are tired of it. It was entertaining for a moment, but now we need real statesmen. And Sherrod Brown's a true statesman, right? He's looking for real compromises, real solutions, real policy that affect real citizens who put their boots on every day or put heels on every day and go to work for an hourly wage, and they run and operate this country, and they do what we need to do to make America the U.S. the strongest country in the world.
Austin, one more question for you, and I appreciate your time here on America's Workforce. 5 years since Butch Lewis Act passed. 5 years now. You know what Congress give, Congress can take away. I mean, you've seen a lot of things. Court, same way. Look at the Supreme Court here and how things have changed over the years because of the makeup of the court. So that being said, is Butch Lewis okay right now or what? Is it safe? Is it going to stay there? In my opinion, and probably yours as well, it probably could be made better.
It's kind of formed into a little market now, right? So it's kind of hard to claw it back out completely. And a lot of the payments that needed to happen have been made, right?
Yeah.
So I don't see you taking it out, but I do. Yeah, I think I can see another iteration of it. Another process. This process has been created by really what Sherrod was able to navigate for us. We have a process now, and we have a mindset around helping workers, and we have an instrument there. It would make total sense to beef that instrument up, right? In a lot of ways, right? We should be encouraging local unions, taking some of the risk out of going back to defined benefit pension plans because some went away from them. How do we create a pathway to incentivize defined benefit plans so that we stabilize our economy and make sure that our retirees can retire and with dignity and take care of our family? Everybody's got grandpas and grandparents and dads and moms, and we're all scared we're going to have to take care of them, and it's going to be a financial drain, and that they're going to live, impoverished lives, and you don't want to see that for the people who raised you and spent their money on you. So I see opportunity. I see a chance for it, but not in this environment. Right? Not with the White House that we have now. Absolutely not. We're not going to move. Everything we know is at risk, from the NLRB to OSHA to our pension plans and our apprenticeship programs. We're walking on a razor's edge right now, trying to keep this stuff together. I'm amazed by some of the great work that's being done out there, not just by our union, but unions across the board, and Liz Schuler leading at the AFL-CIO on some of these sort of macro labor issues. I'm proud of what we're doing, but I see the stars are starting to line back up, and we're going to have an opportunity to pounce like we did a few years ago. And we better have our policy ducks in a row and know what we want and what we're trying to accomplish, and have the right people like Sherrod Brown in there to make it happen.
Amen. Amen. One more thing, you mentioned Liz Schuler. You got to be pretty proud of the fact that you got an IBEW member heading the AFL-CIO.
Yeah. We're always beaming with pride when we talk about Liz. I mean, she's an amazing human being and a great leader, and quite the journey herself. And what she's doing at the AFL-CIO is impressive. And again, I did a stint over there. I did a tour of duty. I did about 8 years at the AFL-CIO at kind of a senior level there, and I got to know Liz very well there. I'd known her before, but she was Secretary Treasurer, and just a phenomenal human being who believes it, just bleeds the labor union movement. So proud of what she's doing. And then Kenny Cooper, what he's doing here in his leadership with the building trades and with the IBEW, and we're growing. I mean, 4th District alone, we're bringing 1,000 new members a month. Like, we're growing at a rate that we've never grown.
Well, Austin, I appreciate your time, your passion. You're a great guest here. I definitely want to have you back here. We got a lot of work to do. You know that. A whole lot of work to do. And we're going to get it done. We're going to get it done because we got to put workers first. When you put workers first, we all win. That's what it's all about. Our featured guest today is Austin Keyser. Austin is a 4th District International Vice President for the IBEW. That's the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. National website for the IBEW, real simple, IBEW.org. That district includes West Virginia, Kentucky, Virginia, Maryland, the District of Columbia, and his home state, the state of Ohio. You take care, stay safe, and stay in touch, okay?
Thank you, Flash. I appreciate it.
And that'll be it for another edition of America's Workforce. Tomorrow, the Communication Workers of America and labor lawyer Andrew Strom will be joining us. Until then, all of you have a safe and wonderful day.
That concludes another episode of the America's Workforce Radio Podcast. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. America's Workforce is a production of Labor Tools and BMA Media Group. Find out more information online at labortools.com.